Hi, well today I'm going to talk about my favorite easy to grow houseplants. So I like lots of plants. There's hardly a plant I've ever met that I don't like. But there are two groups of plants that I find very easy to look after, and there's a lot of different varieties in amongst the different genera. So um, cactus and succulents, that's one group, and the other group are the bromeliad group. So I'm aiming at things that don't always grow really large, but could grow large that you could have in an apartment or in a regular house. Of course, I overdo everything, so I've got too many of everything. But maybe you'll get some ideas for yourself. And none of these plants that I have today are particularly hard to find. So you could just be out wandering around the grocery store or Rona or a flower shop or Home Depot always has a good selection of things too from time to time. Any of those stores and you're going to find a few things. So maybe your inspiration after this will be to think of a kind of plant that you might like and then just maybe collect them for a while. Same kind of plant in different sizes. You could try that. So I want to talk about bromeliads first because I have less of them, I guess. So bromeliads are a really big group of plants also. So there's things like this. I haven't got it all cleaned up here. So this is a really big tillandsia, part of the bromeliad family. Now sometimes when you're shopping after Christmas, you'll find smaller versions of these. They might be in a 4-inch pot, and they'll have a flowering spike. And the flowering spike looks a bit like a paddle, and maybe it'll be about this long. And it'll have nice blue flowers that'll come out of it. So the flowers that come individually out of the paddles. So this I haven't cleaned up much. If I was going to the flower show tomorrow, I'd have to spend all night taking all the dead bits off and trimming the ends to make them all look pointed. But this is just the way it looks right now. And this is a bigger version of a tillandsia. These are all part of the bromeliad family of plants. So this is a bigger one. It's called a silver vase plant, and I think you see it from time to time when you're out everywhere, grocery stores, anywhere. And they have a pinky flower that comes out of the middle here. And usually when you buy them, the flower is there, just starting to come. And the flowers last quite a long time, maybe more than a month. And then once it's done flowering, it'll grow another little shoot, like this one is growing a second shoot over here. And so with this kind of plant, if you don't have much space, when you get a new shoot, you can cut it off and repot it and throw away the old plant. Or if you have lots of room, it's always fun to just have as many as you can in a pot. So in that case, maybe if there was a second shoot coming out here, I might repot it into a bigger pot, and I could end up with a plant that's about this big eventually. So if, say I only wanted to have a few plants and I was going to collect bromeliads, this would be a good one if you had a space for a big one. So these are also bromeliads. Sometimes they have interesting leaves. That's what this one has. There's no flower here yet. It has this nice pink striping in the leaves, so that's kind of pretty. It's not always the flower that attracts me. Sometimes it's just the shape of the plant or the color of the plant. And these bromeliads are often seen in the grocery store. You can find them in lots of places, but they're often in the grocery store, and there's usually a few varieties and a few different colors. So I did a video of bringing in plants, and I showed one that I had painted. So you can get a lot of extra life out of the flower if you just paint it up. This one actually has been painted too. It was orange to start with, but I painted it orange again when it started to get all brown inside. And they just keep growing. See, this one is a smaller plant, just generally, so it's got little shoots coming. See the little shoots down in there that are coming? So altogether, it's not going to be a huge plant. But this one, it's having some new shoots too, because that's an old flower. And you can see how many shoots there are. Tons of them. So this one has potential to be a big specimen plant if I wanted to keep growing it on. Now it's going to take a long, long time for that to flower in the house again, but it will eventually. This is also a bromeliad. I picked up this one up the other day when I was in Kingston. So they call this pink star, but it won't grow to be more than big enough for a 6-inch pot tops, and it'll have other little plantlets by then too. So it will never be a big plant. And this one's got a bit of pink and green variegation in it, but they come in different colors sometimes. So if you decide you like this kind of plant and you have a small space, you can start with one and then just keep looking when you're out shopping around, and then it's always more fun when you find something by accident than when you have to feel like you're under a lot of pressure and you're looking for something. So air plants are also part of the bromeliad family. And this is a bigger air plant. So these are a little bit harder to find than some of the other bromeliads. And there are small air plants too. I've got 3 here. So you know, a place to find little things like this, sometimes you can find them at pet stores. Like this one here I got at Fanatics in Kingston, because they were growing them to put in with their lizards and things. So they'd have them out for people to buy. So maybe I should talk for a minute about the care of these plants. With the air plants, I submerge them in water for about an hour once a week. And then I shake them off and put them back out on the shelf or wherever I have them displayed. So they don't have any roots really. So they're not a very messy plant. So all these other bromeliads, they seem to not mind the conditions that they're growing in. They can grow in fairly low light. I had some like this one and this one growing last winter on a shelf. The shelf was in the window, but my window was this tall and the shelf was this high, and they were on the top shelf. So it was bright light, but there was no direct sun, just some bright light. And I didn't water them very often. With this kind of bromeliad that grows like this, usually there's water inside these leaves here. Because in nature, when it gets cool at night, condensation happens and the water dribbles down into the leaves. And that's one way it gets its nutrition. Because any debris or anything that's in there, it gets to rot because it's sitting in water. And then you don't let the medium get too dry. It can be a bit dry, but you shouldn't let it get really dry like cactus, let's say. And I had them outside in the summer, and I was quite surprised because I had them in some pots, so like this, sitting outside. And we had a few days when we had a lot of rain, you know, and I wasn't really paying attention. So they were sitting in water, and they've been sitting in water for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and it didn't seem to hurt them any. So I mean, I wouldn't do it as a test till it died, but I'm just saying that any kind of condition, they don't seem to be they're not too hard to kill, or too easy to kill, I should say. Not too easy to kill. So those are my bromeliads. So now I think we'll talk about succulents. So everything else pretty much here are succulents. I have a lot of Sansevieria. I find it a very interesting plant. It has a lot of different forms. I don't have them all. Some of the names that people use for these is mother-in-law's tongue. They call it mother-in-law's tongue, and bird's nest. So the spiky ones are called mother-in-law's tongue, and the ones that grow like this are called bird's nest. And again, with these taller ones, there's very many different colors and shapes and sizes. Over here, these are taller. So these are nice floor plants if you have a spot, if you're only having a few plants. And they are also a very low maintenance plant. And these look sort of similar at first when you look at them. They're the same height and that. But if you look really closely, the leaves are not the same at all. And then this is a different one again. This one has a little yellow stripe in it. And this is kind of a fun one. This one is not going to get really big like those are. This is about as tall as it's going to get in the pot, but it's quite pretty. These, I put these outside in the summertime, so depending on the year, sometimes I have lots of, I don't know what is eating them, but probably, well, you know, those little long, skinny things there that I can't think of what they're called right now, but they're like a little worm, like almost like a worm, fat little thing. Come out at night. I can't think of what they're called.
Earwig?
Earwigs, exactly, yes. So this could be earwig damage from a couple of years ago. So unfortunately this would never make it to a flower show unless I repotted them and just put this way in by itself without any damage. But you know, I grow them for fun, so it's not always how it's going to look at a flower show, and it's I think they really appreciate being outside in the summertime too. This is another one. This is a baby. This one will have leaves that are going to be about 8 inches wide and probably 1.5 feet long. And you can't, well, you can sort of tell. It has a bit of a pink edge on it. You can see that it's kind of pink along the side there. So it's a bit different, and it's a big one. It will be a big one. Maybe I won't be able to keep it once it gets big. I'll have to give it away. Here's another form. It's almost tubular in form. There are some that are really tubular. They're totally round and come to a point, but this one's flat inside. It's skinny, but it's flat. And this doesn't get very big. This plant's probably, I don't know, 5 years old, so I think it's full size. So that's a good one for inside the house. I'm not worrying about the botanic names on all these. Some of them I've got labeled. I can tell you what they are. Like this one's Fernwood Mikado, but you know, really who cares about the name? It's if you're buying it because you like the plant, that's what it should be. And then if you want to bring it to the flower show and you can't Google its name, well, maybe somebody at the flower show will tell you what it is. There's a lot of variation in these bird's nest plants too, and they're always small. That's probably as big as they'd ever be. More likely to be this size. And later Jennifer maybe will come over and take a tour of I've got 5 or 6 different ones. So there's lots of variety in them too. Something like this, you know, if it's middle of the winter and you've got them growing somewhere and you want to make a little display down the middle of your table, it makes a nice centerpiece. I've got them in quite tall ceramic containers, but they're not that tall. The pot's not that big. So I find they're really useful little plants. So you can see Sansevieria. That's an easy one to grow. It likes all kinds of light conditions. We used to go away sometimes in the fall and we'd go to the Caribbean and Sansevieria would be growing out along the walkways, right out in full sun. So they'll do all right in full sun as long as you acclimatize the plants before you put them out in the summertime. And they're also really good in low light too. So like office buildings, you see them in office buildings lots of times. And they don't need a lot of care, so you don't need to water them. You water them like cactus. So if you watered it every 3 weeks, that would be enough care probably for them. So what else do we have here? How about the Ripsalis over here? So these are succulents, and they're Ripsalis, that's what they call it, but people call them pencil ferns sometimes, pencil cactus sometimes. And let's say that you don't really want a great big fern in your house, but you want something that's going to hang down a little bit. Well, you could have this, like you could take the handle off and have that on a pedestal. Makes a really nice plant. You just have to keep cutting little bits off here and putting them back in here, because otherwise the center would all be dead after a while. And this particular one, they call it mistletoe cactus. I see it's got a few flowers that have finished. So these are that's the seed pod after the flowers. So the flower is a little bit smaller than this, and it's just a white fuzzy thing. And you know, mistletoe is not a very interesting plant if you've ever bought it at Christmas or got it at Christmas. And these little round bits where the flowers are, they look a lot like mistletoe. So some of these grow long and hang down. Some of them don't really hang down as much. This is the same kind of plant. This one will flower for me pretty consistently in February. It has little small yellow flowers if I've got it in a spot where it gets enough light. And then sometimes in the spring it gets new growth like this. This is all new growth this year. But often it just looks like this. It's just like a bumpy little plant. I think that's when it looks its best. I think it's looking kind of shaggy right now. This is another type. And if you have a really big space, you could try this kind, this one. It's also pencil cactus. And it's quite sculptural. So if I had a really big spot for this, I might get rid of all these small bits down at the bottom and just let this big main stem grow and let it grow to be 8 feet tall. Okay, how about Christmas cactus and Easter cactus are also part of the cactus family. That's what these are. So these are little plants, and little plants flower. I don't really know if you remember, but a few years ago we had someone come and talk to us about these kinds of plants at a hort meeting. And she kept small plants. She took cuttings off of them and grew them on and gave them away for gifts. So you can keep them small like this, and they look pretty. Or you can let them grow to be a larger specimen plant. And so if you only had a few flowers in the house and this was one that you liked and you got it to flower for you, you could have it in a pot that's a 10-inch pot, you know, and have a great big plant. And it'll look really nice in the house, in the living room. And it'd be full of flowers in November maybe. Not all cactus and succulents flower, but these flower fairly dependably. They say the only thing you shouldn't do is move it once the flowers start to open. So I suppose if you're looking for a little plant and it's around Christmas time and you're in a store, you should get one with small buds and not one that has already started to flower. You have less chance of having bud drop. This is the Easter cactus, so it's the same kind of plant but a different variety. And you can see that the sections are a little bit different shape than with the Christmas cactus. And this one's a little harder to get it to flower again, so it could be an experiment or a challenge. But even if it didn't flower, it still could be an interesting plant to look at with all those little breaks in between every leaf. Another group of succulents that probably you're familiar with are the jade plants. So jades can be really huge plants too. You know, you can have a plant that has a stem that's down there that could be this big and it could be as tall as I am. But I don't have room for anything like that, so I just keep them small, and when they start to get a little bit too big, I just take a shoot off and reroot it and start another plant again. There's many different varieties. This one is, if it gets enough sun, the edges of the leaves are red, all around the edges. You can see on some of this new growth it's had enough sun. But really, if it's growing in full sun, all the leaves would be like that. And this one has a little more relaxed form to it. It's not quite as straight up as the other one was. It's called curly gray. So I guess it's called curly because it does have that kind of relaxed look to it. I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep this one because this one doesn't take up very much space as it grows up, but this one's going to take up, already it takes up twice as much space on the windowsill, so I'm not sure. And then this is another one. There are many, many different jade plants, but I have 3. So this is another one with kind of an interesting form. And what happens with these is sometimes people grow them like this, like a sort of a tree form, but sometimes they just break off all these little bits and plant them in little pots. So you could have like a little row in a dish of just small pieces like this. I could take all these off and plant them that way and look pretty, and they would grow. Well, I think this looks pretty good. This plant here, it's a bit susceptible to mealybug because you see how far in, there's all those little bits way down in there, and then these are like little tubes. So there's lots of places for a little bug to get in there and hide. So I have to keep an eye on it that I don't get mealybugs on this one. There are other succulents that hang that are pretty interesting. String of pearls you might be familiar with. I don't have one of those. But this is called burro's tail. So it's another one that hangs. And this is actually part of the sedum family, this one. And it's pretty hard to move around because if you take it and you move it very much, all these little bits fall off. See, like that, they fall off. Of course, each one of these will grow a new plant. It's kind of nice to have it. I just have it hanging over a shelf, so I don't need to have a great big thing. Sometimes when you buy them, it'll be a fuller plant and it'll be all around the pot and hang down. By the time you get it home, you got a whole bunch of it on the floor. But it's a pretty dependable little flower. And this is a plant that's sold as a bedding plant. It's a succulent. It also does pretty well as a house plant. I know its name. Let me see here. Oh, maybe I don't know its name. Anyway, I know that Alice grows this, and she has good luck with it, and it's won prizes at our flower show, our houseplant show. So then there are the echeveria. It's another group of plants. So this is some planting here of an echeveria that's outside in the yard. But when it gets cold, I'll just scoop that out as a bunch and put it in a pot that's about that size. And I'll keep it under lights for the winter and bring it back out and put it in this thing again next summer. So it really likes it outside. It's getting flowers and that. And I have a bird bath back there with the same kind of plants in it. This is also an echeveria. So they have all kinds of different shades of green and different amounts of shininess to the leaves. Those are the echeveria. Oh, here's another hanging one. I think this one's called, what's the common name for this one? Rosary. I think this is called a rosary plant. So usually I hang this outside in a tree for the summer, and if we have lots of rain, then this gets really full and it hangs down about this far. So inside, it might look spindly like this, but it'll still want to hang down this far. So it's pretty hard to find a good spot for this. But you can see why it's a succulent. All these little, this is what holds all the moisture, all these little balls in here, and the leaves come out of that. And this one has a few flowers. So these little balls that you see here, if this was growing better, they'd be all down the stem. And that's why they call it a rosary plant, because it has all those little bumps on it all the way down the stems. So then we have some cactus. Oh, one more succulent here, another bunch of succulents. So you know, a lot of plants, and you have to have a place to put them. So what I do sometimes is I look for plants that are small and aren't going to grow very big. And then I plant them individually, like these are, some of these are, or I can plant them all together. So here I've got a bunch of them planted together. And some of them you've seen already, they've been out there, like the echeveria and the bird's nest sansevieria. But this little plant is called haworthia, and this is a different haworthia. And they don't grow any big. This is probably a 6-year-old plant here, so they don't grow very big at all. Some of them grow bigger, but a lot of them stay very small. So they're great for in a small space, if you live in a small space, or if you want to have lots of different plants, then it's good because it's small. So this, you know, we have some classes in our flower shows where we can have collections of things. So this, maybe I have too many things growing in here for a collection, but when the show schedule comes out, I can decide if I'm going to use some of these plants in that, and then maybe I'll take out a couple if I need to meet the requirements in the show schedule. Like maybe it'll say not more than 5 different plants. I think I've got 8 in here, 7 or 8. So this is not a big plant. I've probably had it for 10 years. It's a barrel cactus. It'll probably never flower, growing in the house. It's a killer though, because these thorns really hurt. Great big thorns. But if I wanted to, I don't know, make a centerpiece for the table and wanted something different for the middle of the centerpiece, I'd get it out of this pot. It's in its own pot down there, and it could be the focal point in a flower arrangement. And it'd be pretty, because it's a bit different, right? Lots of texture. Or if I had somebody I didn't like, I could always give it to them. There's lots of little cactus that don't grow very big. Got a few of them here. A few different ones. So this one reminds me, sometimes when you're in the store, you see little small cactus or little small succulents and they've been painted. They're bright yellow or they're purple or maybe they're red or orange. This is one of the little cactus I think that they paint up sometimes. The thing about that is if you bought that little plant, it'd be okay to leave on the table for a while, but it would never grow. It would just eventually die because there's too much paint on it. It doesn't have a chance to breathe. It would just die on you. Again, sometimes when you have things, you can keep them in the same pot. So these are plants I can use at the flower show if I want to because it's the same variety, same species, and they're growing in the same pot rather than individual pots. There's lots of hairy ones that look really interesting, I think, because they're hairy. But everybody's thorny, you have to be careful. Oh yeah, sometimes you can do weird things. Like this is a cactus, part of the cactus family. I don't know its name. But what I've done here, I've just let the roots get really big. I've had this a long time. So I'll probably take it out of this pot and put it in a bonsai pot. And you know, the roots will be just as important as looking at this part of it down here. So it'll make it interesting. Do all kinds of different things with plants if you think about it. Another thing you can do is if you have a little container, make them look special, just put them in little containers. You may notice that I've got a lot of my cactus and succulents are in clay pots. That's because we don't water them very much, and sometimes it can be a little top heavy, or even if they're not top heavy, because they're so light, it's easy to knock them over. And then you get ground all over the ones that are underneath them, or on your floor. So, the clay pot helps because it adds weight. But that makes a nice little display case, and you know, you can put that on your table too, or on anywhere. Change up the plants every now and then. So those are my favorite easy to grow plants. I think nothing here is hard to grow. They're all pretty forgiving if they get a little bit too much water, but nothing can stay in water a long time. Like even these cactus, some of them are very wet because we've had a bit of rain not too long ago, and they've been wet for a while because it's been shady too. And they're still looking pretty good, but you can't let them be drowned all the time. So those are my favorite succulents and cactus and bromeliads. So I've got two other things to show you that aren't necessarily my favorite houseplants to grow, but they are. So if you've got all these plants, you don't have a lot of color in all this stuff. So sometimes you want to have a little bit of color. So you can have a little grouping of your succulents or your whatever, bromeliads. And then, you know, you can go to the grocery store and spend $16 and the flowers will last about 2 months. That's $2 a day. And if you could put one in with your, you know, after Christmas, everything looks boring and you just want to have a little bit of something that's got color in it. You just, you know, it sort of spruces things up for a short time. Well, 2 months is not that short. And then if you're really feeling adventuresome, I have 3 of these Banda orchids, and they're growing in an empty glass jar, and the roots are all visible here. And how I look after these is I fill the jar up full of water once a week and leave them for at least 2 hours, an hour or two. If I forget, it's okay. I can leave them, you know, all day and then dump them out. That's all I do with them. When they're grown commercially, they're grown in Asia, and they grow them in clotheslines because of all the humidity. So they just hang them up in the clotheslines, and maybe there'll be an acre of these things growing in clotheslines because they have really beautiful flowers when they flower, and they're used as cut flowers. So I got this at Home Depot probably 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. I have 3 of them. So they're pretty dependable at flowering at least once a year. Often they'll flower twice a year. So you have to not mind the look, right? You have to not mind having this in your house. But when the flower comes, the last time, this one flowered most recently, and the flower probably lasted 10 or 11 weeks. And it was like a stem with 8 flowers. And each flower was this big. So it was quite rewarding in that sense. But you know, they're not the, you have to like the idea of waiting. And, you know, not everybody would like that as a plant in the house, but it's not too bad. And so I just grow them on a windowsill. I'm careful when I see this happening, this redness. This happens to lots of different orchids. Phalaenopsis orchids will get this also. That just means they're getting too much sun. So then I move it either back from my window a bit or put it in a different window for a while until the sun has moved around. I don't have a lot of good south-facing windows in my house, but the windows I have, depending on where the sun is, they can get more sun, especially during the morning half of the day, because there's a house right beside my house, so not so much likely to have sun on the south side in the afternoon in the wintertime. But yeah, this is not a cheap plant to start with. You might have to spend $60 to get one of these, but you know, I haven't killed it. I've had it a long time, and it flowers. So it's just 2 extra little kinds of plants for you to think about. So maybe somebody else will give a little talk sometime about their favorite easy to grow house plants too, and maybe I'll go online in January and February, and it'll encourage people to think about what they can grow. It's a good time of year to buy house plants. Everybody seems to have lots then, and who knows, maybe we'll have a virtual houseplant show this year.